In the forgotten depths of the galaxy's most ancient archives, where dust settles upon holocrons that have not stirred for 1,000 years, there exists a tale that even the wisest Jedi Masters dare not speak aloud. It is the chronicle of one who walked the razor's edge between absolute power and cosmic sacrifice, whose very name became both blessing and curse across 1,000,000 worlds. Behold a figure cloaked in shadow standing before the Sith Emperor's throne, crimson lightning crackling between outstretched fingers as entire star systems burn in the distance. This is no ordinary Sith Lord, no mere servant of the dark side's hunger. This is the Emperor's wrath, forged in the crucible of ultimate betrayal, tempered by choices that would determine the fate of every living soul in existence. But how does one rise from the windswept tombs of Korriban to become the galaxy's most unlikely guardian? What transforms an ambitious young Sith from seeker of power into protector of life itself? The answer lies buried beneath layers of deception so profound that truth and lie became indistinguishable, in a web of manipulation spanning generations of Sith Lords and their terrible ambitions. Listen closely, for you shall hear of Darth Barris, master of lies, who claimed the voice of gods while serving only his own hunger for dominion. You shall witness the corruption of innocence as a Jedi Padawan faces truths that shatter the very foundations of her beliefs. And you shall stand in the presence of ultimate evil itself as the immortal Emperor offers partnership in the consumption of all existence. Yet this tale begins not with gods or emperors, but with a single transport ship descending through Korriban's crimson skies, carrying one whose destiny would reshape the very meaning of what it means to serve the dark side. For sometimes, the greatest acts of light emerge from the deepest shadows, and the most profound loyalty is born from the ashes of absolute betrayal. Hey friends, tonight we journey into the complete chronicles of the Emperor's wrath, following the remarkable transformation from ambitious Sith apprentice to cosmic guardian, from the brutal trials of Korriban's ancient academy to standing before powers that would consume galaxies. This is a story of loyalty tested beyond breaking, power corrupting absolutely, and the ultimate choice between personal ambition and universal salvation. So before you settle in, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these deep dives into Star Wars lore. And here's something interesting, about 79% of you watching right now haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying this journey through the galaxy far, far away, that subscribe button really helps the channel grow and bring you more epic tales like this one. If you love RPG lore and want even more incredible stories, definitely check out my friend's channel Tamriel Tales. I've dropped the link in the description below. Now I'd love to hear from you in the comments about where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. There's something magical about knowing we're all sharing this galactic adventure together, whether it's your morning commute or late night wind down. So dim those lights. Get comfortable under your favorite blanket, and let's begin this epic journey through one of Star Wars' most compelling character transformations together. Long ago, when the Sith Empire cast its shadow across half the known galaxy, and the name of Korriban struck terror into the hearts of Republic citizens, there came to that ancient world of tombs and dark learning a young noble whose bloodline traced back to the Empire's founding dynasties. The crimson sands of that forsaken planet had witnessed the rise and fall of countless Dark Lords, each leaving their mark upon the Valley of the Dark Lords, where their spirits still whispered secrets of power to those bold enough to listen. The Academy itself rose from living rock like some great predator carved from the planet's bones, its towers and ramparts designed not for beauty but for the singular purpose of transforming the weak into instruments of the dark side's will. Here, beneath skies that never knew the gentle touch of blue, but burned always with the angry red of twin suns, the Empire's most promising Force sensitives came to either ascend to greatness or perish in the attempt. Our future wrath arrived aboard an Imperial transport as the sands howled with voices of the long dead. carrying nothing save noble birth, exceptional force sensitivity, and an ambition that burned brighter than Korriban's perpetual storms. The Academy's gates, fashioned from the same black stone that had absorbed centuries of dark side corruption, opened to receive another student in the ancient arts of power and domination. It was within these hallowed yet terrible halls that fate first placed upon our protagonist's path, a treasure hunter whose purple skin and graceful movements marked her as Twithlick, though her circumstances were far from the dancing girls found in hut pleasure palaces. Vet had been captured while pursuing archaeological treasures in the Outer Rim. Her natural talent for slicing security systems and her intimate knowledge of the galaxy's underworld making her valuable enough to preserve as a slave rather than simply execute as most Republic sympathizers would have been. At first glance, master and servant seemed as different as the twin suns that scorched Korriban's surface. One born to privilege and power, trained from childhood in the expectation of greatness, the other surviving by wit and cunning in the galaxy's darker corners, where credits mattered more than bloodlines, and a quick tongue could mean the difference between life and death. Yet beneath these surface differences, both possessed that peculiar combination of resilience and ambition that would prove essential in the trials ahead. The Academy's training regimen had been perfected over millennia to separate the truly worthy from those who merely possessed raw potential. Students were thrust into competition, not merely for grades or recognition, but for survival itself. The weak served the strong, and the strong served only their own advancement toward the ultimate goal of Sith lordship. It was a system designed to produce the most cunning, the most ruthless, and the most powerful Force users the galaxy had ever seen. Among the current crop of acolytes, none presented more immediate challenge than Thorn Alf Sion, of an established Sith family whose connections reached into the highest levels of Imperial society. Where our protagonist relied upon natural talent and intuitive understanding of the Force, Alf possessed the advantages of formal training from birth, access to restricted techniques, and most importantly, the assumption of superiority that came with generations of Sith breeding. The rivalry between them became the stuff of Academy legend, each pushing the other to ever greater displays of power and cunning. The trials themselves took place within tombs that had stood for thousands of years, monuments to Dark Lords whose names had become synonymous with power itself. In the tomb of Ajunta Pal, first of the Dark Lords of the Sith, students faced not merely ancient traps and guardian beasts, but the accumulated weight of dark side energy that had been building since the very foundations of Sith philosophy were laid. Here, in chambers carved with hieroglyphs that hurt the mind to read, aspiring Sith learned to channel hatred, fear, and passion into instruments of devastating power. The tomb of Tulak Horde challenged students with trials of combat, for he had been known as the greatest lightsaber duelist of his age, a warrior whose blade work was considered art by some and terror by all who faced him. Ancient training droids, powered by dark side alchemy rather than mere technology, tested reflexes and technique with lethal precision. Those who emerged victorious carried with them not merely improved skills, but artifacts imbued with the combat wisdom of ages past. In the depths of Marka Ragnus's tomb, students faced tests of cunning and manipulation, for that ancient lord had ruled not through raw power alone, but through an understanding of how to bend others to his will. Here, in chambers where shadows seemed to move with their own intelligence, aspiring Sith learned that true power lay not in destroying one's enemies, but in making them serve your purposes willingly. It was during these tomb explorations that our protagonist first claimed the weapon that would become as much a part of their legend as their name itself. Deep within forgotten chambers where the air itself seemed thick with malevolent presence, they discovered a lightsaber whose crystal had been feeding upon dark side energy for centuries. The blade hummed with power that went beyond mere technological sophistication, carrying within its focused beam the accumulated hatred and ambition of previous wielders. Overseer Tremel, the Academy instructor responsible for evaluating this particular group of students, recognized early that he had discovered something exceptional. A career spent identifying potential had given him an eye for recognizing not merely those who possessed strength, but those who possessed the wisdom to use strength effectively. In the young noble he saw not just another privileged student trading upon family connections, but someone whose understanding of power transcended mere brute force application. Vet, observing these trials from her unique position as both outsider and intimate companion, provided perspectives that no purely imperial education could offer. Her knowledge of the galaxy beyond Korriban's borders, her understanding of how ordinary beings perceived Sith power, and her natural talent for reading people and situations proved invaluable in navigating Academy politics. More importantly, her friendship offered something that few Sith ever experienced: genuine loyalty based upon mutual respect rather than fear or ambition. As graduation approached and whispers began to circulate about the most promising students being selected for service under various Sith Lords, it became clear that our protagonist had attracted attention from the highest levels of Imperial power. References to Darth Barus, Master of Imperial Intelligence and one of the most feared members of the Dark Council, suggested that the trials of Korriban had been merely preparation for responsibilities that would span the galaxy itself. The Academy had fulfilled its ancient purpose, taking raw potential and forging it into an instrument capable of serving the Empire's greatest ambitions. Yet none who walked those halls, not even the wisest instructors, could have imagined that they were witnessing the first steps of a journey that would ultimately lead to confrontation with the most powerful being in Sith history, and a choice that would determine the fate of every living soul in existence. The journey from Korriban to Dromund Kaisers aboard an Imperial transport vessel provided the first taste of the galaxy's true scope for one who had known only the confines of Academy walls and ancient tombs. Through the viewport, stars wheeled past in their eternal dance, each point of light representing entire systems where the Empire's influence extended like invisible threads woven through the fabric of space itself. The hyperspace tunnel stretched endlessly ahead, its swirling blues and whites mesmerizing in their alien beauty, while behind them Korriban shrank to nothing more than a memory of red sand and darker purposes. Ved had spent much of the voyage exploring their assigned quarters with the enthusiasm of someone finally free from the Academy's oppressive atmosphere. Her natural curiosity about Imperial technology led to impromptu lessons in starship systems, though her commentary often carried the sharp wit of someone who had survived by questioning everything around her. She possessed an uncanny ability to find humor in the most mundane aspects of Imperial bureaucracy, pointing out the absurdities that those born within the system had long since accepted as natural order. The capital world of the Sith Empire revealed itself gradually as their transport descended through layers of perpetual storm clouds that had shrouded Dromund Kaisers for millennia. Lightning played across the ship's hull in patterns that seemed almost intelligent, as if the very atmosphere recognized the arrival of another servant to the dark side's endless hunger. Below the cloud layer, the cityscape emerged like something from a fever dream of absolute power made manifest in stone and metal. Car City stretched across the horizon in every direction, its towers and spires reaching toward the storm-laden sky, with architectural ambitions that dwarfed even the grandest Republic monuments. The buildings seemed to grow from the earth itself, their surfaces carved with reliefs depicting the Empire's greatest victories and most terrible defeats, each structure a testament to the endless cycle of conquest and consolidation that had built this civilization upon the bones of countless others. The Dark Council's citadel dominated the skyline like a black sun around which all other construction orbited, its presence felt even at this distance through the oppressive weight of accumulated dark side energy. Here dwelt the 12 most powerful Sith Lords in the galaxy, each commanding resources that could reshape entire star systems according to their will, each plotting against the others in games of power that spanned decades and claimed millions of lives as collateral damage. Yet it was not to the Citadel that their transport was bound, but to a more modest facility that nevertheless radiated its own aura of menace and authority. The headquarters of Imperial Intelligence occupied a position that allowed its master to observe all comings and goings from the seat of Sith power, while maintaining the fiction of humble service to greater lords. Its architecture spoke of efficiency rather than grandeur, though the subtle defensive modifications suggested that its occupant understood the difference between displaying power and actually possessing it. Darth Baras awaited his new apprentice in chambers that revealed much about the man through their careful arrangement and studied intimidation. The Sith Lord himself was a figure of impressive physical presence, his massive frame draped in robes that seemed to absorb light rather than merely block it. His face bore the marks of decades spent channeling the dark side's corrosive energies, yet his eyes retained the calculating intelligence that had elevated him to the Dark Council and made him master of the Empire's most extensive spy network. The conversation that followed was less interview than evaluation, each question designed to probe not merely knowledge or ability, but the deeper questions of character and ambition that would determine suitability for the tasks ahead. Baras spoke of the ongoing Cold War with the Galactic Republic, of the delicate balance of terror that kept open hostilities at bay, while allowing both sides to prepare for the inevitable resumption of total conflict. His words painted a galaxy balanced on the edge of a knife, where individual actions could tip entire sectors toward peace or devastation. The missions he outlined were varied in scope but unified in their ultimate purpose of weakening Republic resolve while strengthening Imperial capabilities. Some involved the elimination of specific targets whose activities threatened Imperial interests. Others required the more subtle work of turning Republic citizens against their own government through carefully orchestrated campaigns of doubt and fear. All demanded absolute loyalty to the Empire's cause and unquestioning obedience to orders that might seem counterproductive or even treasonous to those lacking the broader strategic vision. It was during these preliminary briefings that fate introduced another figure who would prove instrumental in the trials ahead. Malavai Quinn entered the proceedings with the bearing of a professional soldier whose dedication to duty had survived disgrace and exile from more prestigious postings. His imperial uniform bore the insignia of the regular military rather than the Sith hierarchy, yet his tactical knowledge and strategic acumen had earned him a place in Baras's organization, despite the social barriers that normally separated Force users from their mundane counterparts. Quinn's background revealed a career marked by competence rewarded with suspicion, brilliant victories overshadowed by political missteps that had consigned him to increasingly obscure assignments until Baras recognized his true worth. His analysis of current galactic conditions demonstrated an understanding of warfare that transcended simple battlefield tactics, encompassing the economic and social factors that ultimately determined whether conflicts could be sustained across the vast distances and timeframes that interstellar war demanded. The dynamic between Sith apprentice and Imperial officer required careful navigation, as traditional hierarchy demanded that Force users command while military personnel obeyed, yet practical necessity suggested that wisdom lay in listening to those whose expertise complemented rather than duplicated one's own strengths. Quinn's respectful deference masked a professional confidence that came from years of successful operations, while his new commander learned to balance the authority inherent in Sith training with the humility required to benefit from subordinates' specialized knowledge. Vet's integration into this expanding command structure presented its own unique challenges, as her status as both alien and former slave placed her outside the normal categories that Imperial society used to determine worth and position. Yet, her skills proved immediately valuable in ways that no amount of formal training could duplicate. her intimate knowledge of the galaxy's criminal underworld, providing insights into smuggling routes, black market networks, and the informal information channels that often proved more reliable than official intelligence reports. The ship assigned to their small but growing crew reflected Barris's understanding that effective operations required both impressive capabilities and the ability to blend into ordinary spacefarer traffic when circumstances demanded discretion. Its design balanced comfort with functionality, providing living spaces adequate for extended deployments while concealing weapon systems and communication equipment sophisticated enough to support complex intelligence operations across multiple star systems. As their first official mission briefing concluded, and preparations began for departure from Dromund Kaas, the scope of their new responsibilities became clear. They were no longer students learning theoretical applications of power, but active participants in a conflict that would determine the future of galactic civilization. The academic discussions of Sith philosophy that had dominated Academy life gave way to practical considerations of logistics, security, and the moral compromises that intelligence work inevitably demanded from those willing to serve causes greater than their own comfort or conscience. The storm clouds of Dromund Kaas parted reluctantly as their vessel climbed toward the stars, the capital's lights fading behind them like embers scattered across the darkness. Ahead lay worlds where Republic influence still held sway, where Jedi Knights walked openly among populations that had never known the Empire's particular brand of order, where the subtle work of undermining enemy resolve would test every skill learned in Korriban's tombs and every lesson absorbed from Barris's careful instruction in the arts of power, both obvious and hidden. The galaxy at war reveals itself differently to those who observe from the shadows rather than the front lines of battle. While Holonet broadcasts spoke of diplomatic tensions and trade disputes, those versed in reading between carefully crafted statements understood that Republic and Empire were already engaged in a conflict whose intensity was limited only by the mutual recognition that total war would leave both civilizations vulnerable to external threats lurking in the unknown regions and wild space beyond. Barris had chosen their first major target with characteristic precision, focusing not on the obvious military commanders or political leaders whose elimination would generate headlines and retaliation, but on a figure whose importance lay precisely in his ability to operate beneath the notice of conventional intelligence services. Nomen Karr was a Jedi Master whose official record suggested nothing more remarkable than competent service in several minor diplomatic missions, yet Barris's sources painted a very different picture of a man whose influence extended far beyond anything suggested by his modest public profile. The true measure of Nomen Karr's significance lay not in armies commanded or territories controlled, but in a single individual whose unique gifts had attracted attention from the highest levels of both Jedi hierarchy and Sith intelligence networks. Jaisa Wilson was barely more than a child by the standards of species whose lifespans measured in centuries, yet her ability to perceive truth through the Force transcended anything recorded in either tradition's historical archives. In her presence, deception became impossible and hidden motivations revealed themselves with a clarity that made her simultaneously invaluable and impossibly dangerous. The hunt for such a target required patience measured not in days or weeks but in months and years, as those with the most to hide had learned to construct elaborate networks of misdirection and false identity that could withstand all but the most persistent investigation. Nomen Karr had spent decades preparing for the possibility that his Padawan would eventually attract unwanted attention, creating layers of protection that extended across multiple star systems and drew upon resources accumulated through a lifetime of careful relationship building. Their first serious lead emerged from the criminal underworld of Nar Shaddaa, where information flowed like the neon advertisements that painted the moon's endless urban sprawl in gaudy colors that never quite managed to hide the desperation underlying its apparent prosperity. Vet's connections among the smugglers and slicers who called the Hutt-controlled territory home proved invaluable in navigating a society where trust was a commodity bought and sold like any other, where the wrong question asked of the wrong person could result in disappearance so complete that even the authorities would assume you had never existed. The intelligence they gathered painted a picture of systematic preparation that spoke to Nomen Karr's understanding that his Padawan's abilities would eventually bring them into conflict with forces beyond the normal scope of Jedi-Sith rivalry. He had established safe houses on worlds throughout the Mid-Rim, created false identities backed by documentation sophisticated enough to pass casual inspection, and cultivated relationships with beings whose own reasons for avoiding Imperial attention made them natural allies in any enterprise requiring discretion above all else. Yet even the most carefully constructed deceptions contained flaws for those trained to recognize them. And Quinn's analytical mind proved particularly adept at identifying the subtle patterns that revealed human involvement in what should have appeared to be random coincidences. His military background provided insights into the logistical requirements of maintaining multiple identities across vast distances, while his experience with Imperial bureaucracy allowed him to recognize when documentation was too perfect to be genuine. The trail led them first to Alderaan, where the ongoing civil war between noble houses provided excellent cover for individuals seeking to operate without attracting attention from planetary authorities too occupied with their own survival to investigate suspicious activities thoroughly. The planet's reputation for beauty and culture masked a political situation of such complexity that even experienced diplomats found themselves struggling to determine which faction represented legitimate authority and which merely possessed sufficient firepower to enforce their claims. House Thal's bid for the throne had attracted Imperial support not merely because of their philosophical alignment with authoritarian principles, but because their victory would provide the Empire with a friendly government in a strategic location whose symbolic significance to Republic morale extended far beyond its actual military value. The involvement of Jedi Knights in supporting rival claimants gave Imperial agents additional justification for activities that might otherwise have appeared to violate the fragile peace treaty that officially governed relations between the two galactic powers. The war itself had settled into the grinding attrition that characterized most conflicts between forces too evenly matched for quick victory, yet too committed to their causes for negotiated settlement. Ancient castles that had stood for millennia found themselves transformed into fortresses, bristling with modern defensive systems, their gardens and courtyards scarred by artillery strikes that sent shockwaves through foundations laid by architects who could never have imagined such destructive applications of technology. It was within this chaos of competing loyalties and shifting alliances that signs of Nomen Karr's passage first became apparent to trained observers. Refugee movements that followed patterns too convenient to be coincidental, supply convoys that deviated from optimal routes for reasons that made no logistical sense, communications traffic that spiked in certain sectors with timing that correlated suspiciously with reported Jedi activities in neighboring systems. The investigation required abilities that complemented rather than duplicated each other, as no single individual could have successfully navigated the multiple layers of deception and misdirection that protected their quarry. Vet's talent for electronic infiltration allowed them to access security records and communication logs that painted detailed pictures of movement patterns, while Quinn's strategic analysis identified the underlying purposes that gave meaning to apparently random activities. Their Sith training proved equally valuable in more direct applications, as several of their leads could only be pursued through locations where Republic sympathizers might react violently to obvious Imperial presence. The ability to deflect blaster bolts with lightsaber technique or influence weak minds through force suggestion often meant the difference between successful intelligence gathering and premature exposure of their mission to those with every reason to ensure its failure. Yet for all their combined skills and resources, Norman Carr remained consistently one step ahead of their pursuit, his preparations proving more thorough and his network of allies more extensive than even Barris's intelligence apparatus had anticipated. Each apparent breakthrough led to carefully prepared dead ends, each promising lead dissolved under scrutiny to reveal elaborate deceptions designed to waste time and resources, while the real trail grew steadily colder. The frustration of such extended pursuit began to reveal character in ways that shorter missions never could, as the comfortable routine of Academy life gave way to the uncertainty and improvisation that marked real intelligence work. Living aboard ship for extended periods created its own social dynamics, while the constant need for vigilance against discovery added psychological pressure that tested bonds formed under very different circumstances. Let's adaptability served the team well during this period, as her experience with the galaxy's seedier elements provided insights into the mindset of those who lived constantly under threat of exposure and capture. Her understanding of how fugitives thought and behaved proved invaluable in predicting likely courses of action, while her natural optimism provided emotional stability during the long stretches when progress seemed impossible. Quinn's methodical approach to problem-solving offered a counterbalance to the frustration that might otherwise have led to rash actions and premature exposure. His insistence on thorough analysis and systematic investigation ensured that no potentially valuable information was overlooked, while his military discipline helped maintain operational security even when the temptation to take shortcuts became almost overwhelming. As the hunt extended from weeks into months, the scope of Norman Carr's preparations became increasingly apparent, suggesting not merely a man protecting his Padawan, but someone whose understanding of galactic politics extended far beyond anything typical of Jedi isolationism. The resources at his disposal spoke to connections that reached into the highest levels of Republic government, while his operational sophistication suggested training that went far beyond anything offered in standard Jedi curriculum. The moment of first contact with Jacer Wilsam came not through careful planning or brilliant deduction, but through the simple accident of being in the right place when circumstances beyond anyone's control forced her into the open. A terrorist attack on civilian targets by extremists claiming Republic allegiance had drawn Jedi responders to provide aid and comfort to the wounded. And among those who came to heal, rather than to hunt, was a young woman whose presence seemed to illuminate the very air around her with an aura of compassion that transcended anything mere force training could explain. Yet even at first glance, something about Jacer set her apart from the other Jedi who moved among the casualties with practiced efficiency, born of too much experience with such tragedies, where her companions focused on immediate medical needs and psychological comfort. She seemed to perceive deeper truths about each person she encountered, responding not merely to their expressed needs but to motivations and fears they themselves might not have fully understood. Her interactions carried a quality of genuine recognition rather than professional sympathy, as if she truly saw each individual rather than simply another victim requiring assistance. The investigation that followed revealed the true scope of her unique abilities, which extended far beyond anything recorded in either Jedi or Sith archives. Through careful observation and discreet inquiry among witnesses, a picture emerged of someone whose connection to the Force allowed her to perceive not just surface thoughts and emotions, but the fundamental moral character that drove individuals to make the choices that shaped their lives. In her presence, pretense became impossible, and hidden agendas revealed themselves with a clarity that made conventional deception utterly useless. Such gifts inevitably attracted attention from those whose activities depended upon the ability to present false facades to the galaxy at large, and the list of individuals who would benefit from eliminating such a threat included some of the most powerful figures in both Empire and Republic. That she remained alive and free spoke not only to Nomen Karr's protective capabilities, but to a broader conspiracy of silence among those who understood that certain abilities were too dangerous for public knowledge, regardless of the political advantages their exposure might provide. The ethical implications of pursuing such a target forced consideration of questions that had not arisen during more conventional missions against military commanders and political leaders whose activities clearly threatened Imperial interests. Jaisa herself had committed no crimes against the Empire, had never taken up arms against Imperial forces, had never engaged in the kind of propaganda activities that typically justified elimination or capture operations. Her threat lay purely in her potential to expose truths that powerful individuals preferred to keep hidden, making her pursuit a preventive rather than retaliatory action. The careful documentation of Nomen Karr's activities that had been required for their extended hunt now revealed patterns that cast his protective instincts in a very different light than simple Master-Padawan devotion might suggest. His network of contacts included individuals whose own moral compromises made them vulnerable to exactly the kind of exposure that Jaisa's abilities represented, while his resources seemed to extend far beyond anything a single Jedi Master should have been able to accumulate through legitimate means. The evidence they gathered painted a picture of systematic involvement in activities that violated both the Jedi Code and Republic law, though always in service of causes that could be rationalized as serving the greater good. Weapons trafficking to resistance movements on Imperial worlds, assassination of civilians whose only crime was providing information to Imperial authorities, manipulation of local governments to ensure outcomes favorable to Republic interests, regardless of the wishes of populations affected by such interventions. Most damaging of all were records suggesting that Nomen Karr had been aware of his Padawan's unique abilities from the earliest stages of her training, and had systematically shaped her development to maximize her usefulness as a tool for advancing his own agenda rather than helping her achieve her full potential as a Jedi. The relationship between them revealed itself as far more complex and troubling than the idealized mentor-student bond that Jedi tradition celebrated, carrying undertones of manipulation and exploitation that transformed protection into a form of sophisticated imprisonment. When confronted with this evidence in the controlled environment that careful planning had made possible, Jaisa's reaction provided final confirmation of the abilities that had made her such a sought-after prize. Her force-enhanced perception immediately recognized the truth of the accusations, despite her emotional investment in maintaining faith in the man who had been her protector and teacher for most of her conscious life. The cognitive dissonance between lived experience and revealed reality created a crisis of understanding that shook the very foundations of her worldview. The philosophical discussions that followed revealed a mind of exceptional sophistication, struggling to reconcile ideals that had shaped her entire sense of identity with evidence that those ideals had been used to justify their own violation. Her Jedi training emphasized the importance of truth and justice, yet the man who had taught her these principles had systematically engaged in deception and vigilante violence. Her commitment to protecting innocent life conflicted with the recognition that her master's activities had resulted in deaths that could have been avoided through more conventional diplomatic channels. The choice she faced transcended simple questions of political loyalty or personal allegiance, striking at fundamental questions about the nature of morality and the proper relationship between individual conscience and institutional authority. The Jedi Order had failed to prevent her master's corruption, while the Sith tradition offered power that could be used to ensure such failures never occurred again, but only at the cost of abandoning the compassion that had defined her approach to force use since childhood. The path she ultimately chose reflected not a rejection of her previous convictions, but a more sophisticated understanding of how those convictions could be applied in a galaxy where absolute moral clarity remained forever beyond reach. Whether she embraced the passionate intensity of Sith philosophy or maintained her commitment to Jedi principles while acknowledging their limitations, her decision carried implications that extended far beyond personal preference to encompass questions about the proper use of power in service of justice. Nomen Karr's response to his Padawan's choice revealed the true depth of his corruption as the protective facade fell away to expose possessiveness and control disguised as love and concern. His final confrontation with those who had exposed his deceptions carried none of the dignity that should have marked a Jedi Master's last stand, instead displaying the desperate fury of someone whose carefully constructed self-image had been revealed as elaborate self-deception. The lightsaber duel that followed was less a contest of skill than a demonstration of how philosophical corruption ultimately manifests in practical weakness, as years of rationalizing increasingly questionable actions had eroded the clarity of purpose that effective combat required. His technique retained the mechanical precision of extensive training, but lacked the unity of mind and body that characterized truly masterful force use, while his tactics revealed desperation rather than the strategic thinking that should have guided someone of his experience. His defeat carried a tragic quality that transcended simple justice, representing not merely the end of one individual's moral journey, but a cautionary demonstration of how even the most well-intentioned beings could be led astray by the conviction that noble goals justified ignoble means. In his final moments, glimpses of the man he might have been flickered through the mask of what he had become, suggesting that corruption was a process rather than an event, and that its early stages might be so subtle as to escape detection even by those experiencing them firsthand. Jace's integration into their crew brought abilities that complemented their existing capabilities, while adding perspectives that none of them could have developed through their own experiences. Her insights into human motivation proved invaluable in evaluating potential allies and enemies, while her moral sensitivity provided guidance in situations where practical considerations might otherwise have overshadowed ethical implications. Most importantly, her presence served as a constant reminder that power without principle inevitably led to the kind of corruption they had witnessed in her former master. The galaxy's political landscape shifted beneath their feet like sand dunes in a desert storm, though the changes remained invisible to those who lacked the training to read the subtle signs that preceded major upheavals in galactic power structures. What appeared to casual observers as routine diplomatic exchanges and standard military rotations carried deeper meanings for those versed in the intricate dance of influence and authority that governed relations between the Empire's most powerful figures. Lieutenant Pierce joined their operations during this period of seeming stability, his recruitment representing less a planned expansion of their capabilities than recognition that the scope of their missions had grown beyond what their existing crew could handle effectively. The veteran Imperial Commando brought with him not merely exceptional combat skills and tactical expertise, but the kind of institutional memory that only came from years of service within the Empire's military hierarchy. His straightforward approach to problem-solving provided a welcome counterpoint to the increasingly complex political considerations that seemed to complicate every assignment. Pierce's background revealed the kind of steady competence that formed the backbone of any successful military organization, his record showing consistent performance across a variety of challenging environments without the dramatic peaks and valleys that often marked more celebrated careers. He had served on worlds whose names appeared in no public records, had participated in operations whose existence was denied by official spokesmen, had demonstrated the kind of reliability that made commanders sleep easier, knowing their orders would be executed regardless of personal cost or political consequences. The integration of another strong personality into their close-knit group required adjustments that went beyond simple logistical concerns about sleeping arrangements and duty schedules. Each member brought perspectives shaped by very different backgrounds and experiences, creating a dynamic that could either enhance their collective effectiveness or generate friction that undermined their ability to function as a cohesive unit. Pierce's military discipline provided structure that helped channel their diverse talents toward common objectives, while his pragmatic worldview served as an anchor during discussions that might otherwise have drifted into theoretical speculation. It was during this period of apparent success and expanding influence that the first disturbing hints began to surface about the true nature of Darth Baras's relationship with the highest levels of Imperial authority. Casual references to direct communication with the Emperor himself, claims of receiving orders that bypassed the normal Dark Council hierarchy, assertions of authority that seemed to exceed anything previously associated with his official positions within the intelligence apparatus. The initial reaction to such claims involved more curiosity than suspicion, as the Byzantine complexity of Sith politics had always included relationships and power structures that remained hidden from public view. The Emperor's personal involvement in operational details had precedent in Imperial history, while Barris's position as Master of Intelligence provided plausible justification for the kind of privileged access that his recent behavior seemed to suggest. Yet patterns began to emerge that troubled those trained to recognize when surface explanations failed to account for underlying realities. The timing of Barris's claimed communications with Imperial authority coincided suspiciously with periods when independent verification of the Emperor's activities became impossible to obtain. His orders often contradicted established imperial policy in ways that suggested either dramatic shifts in strategic thinking or fundamental misunderstanding of broader governmental objectives. Most disturbing of all were subtle changes in Barris himself, alterations in behavior and demeanor that suggested the psychological pressure of maintaining an elaborate deception over extended periods. His confidence had always carried undertones of arrogance, but now it seemed to border on megalomania, while his treatment of subordinates reflected the kind of paranoia that typically accompanied guilt over activities that could not withstand close scrutiny. The appearance of Servant One marked the beginning of revelations that would ultimately reshape their understanding, not merely of recent events, but of the fundamental nature of imperial governance itself. This mysterious figure emerged from shadows that seemed deeper than mere physical concealment, carrying authority that transcended normal hierarchical structures while speaking in riddles that gradually resolved into truths too dangerous for direct statement. His initial approach seemed calculated to test their loyalty and discretion rather than immediately challenge their existing beliefs about the chain of command they served. Through carefully phrased questions and oblique references to historical precedents, he guided them toward recognition that discrepancies in Barris's recent behavior fit patterns associated with elaborate fraud rather than legitimate exercise of delegated authority. The evidence he presented accumulated slowly, each piece seemingly insignificant in isolation, but combining to create a picture of systematic deception that extended back years rather than months. Communications supposedly originating from the Emperor's personal staff that showed subtle linguistic patterns inconsistent with authentic imperial correspondence, scheduling conflicts that made claimed face-to-face meetings logistically impossible, resource allocations that exceeded anything justified by official mission parameters. Most damaging of all was the revelation that the Sith Emperor had not been available for consultation with anyone, including the Dark Council itself, for a period extending far longer than any previous absence in recorded imperial history. His withdrawal from active governance had been so gradual and carefully managed that even those closest to the centers of power had failed to recognize when consultation had given way to complete isolation, when delayed responses had become no responses at all. The implications of such revelations extended far beyond questions about Barris's personal integrity or the legitimacy of their recent missions. If the Empire's ultimate authority had been absent or incapacitated for an extended period, then the entire governmental structure existed in a state of crisis that had been concealed through elaborate collective self-deception. Every order issued in the Emperor's name, every policy implemented with his supposed approval, every strategic decision justified by reference to his will had been based upon foundations that no longer existed. Vet's response to these revelations reflected her natural skepticism about authority figures and institutional claims, her background having provided extensive experience with beings who used impressive titles and elaborate ceremonies to disguise fundamental weaknesses or moral corruption. Her analysis of the situation focused on practical questions about how such an elaborate deception could have been maintained and who else might have been complicit in perpetuating it. Quinn's military training led him to evaluate the broader strategic implications of serving under false authority, his concern focusing on the legal and ethical questions surrounding orders that might lack legitimate authorization. His systematic approach to analyzing evidence revealed additional discrepancies that supported Servant One's claims while raising new questions about the scope and duration of the deception they had been unwittingly supporting. Jace's unique abilities provided confirmation that transcended conventional evidence gathering, her force-enhanced perception immediately recognizing the fundamental truthfulness of Servant One's revelations despite their revolutionary implications for everything they had believed about Imperial governance. Her insights into human motivation helped explain how even intelligent and experienced individuals could be manipulated into accepting elaborate lies when those lies were presented gradually and supported by apparently credible evidence. The choice they faced transcended simple questions of personal loyalty or career advancement, striking at fundamental issues about the proper response to authority that had revealed itself as fraudulent. Continuing to serve Barriss meant becoming complicit in deception that threatened the stability of Imperial governance itself, while opposing him required challenging one of the most powerful and dangerous individuals in the galaxy, with resources that included extensive networks of loyal agents and assassins. The decision to rebel emerged not from sudden inspiration, but from gradual recognition that certain principles mattered more than personal security or professional advancement. The empire they had sworn to serve deserved better than rule through deception, while the galactic citizens whose lives were affected by their actions deserved governance based on legitimate authority rather than elaborate fraud. Yet rebellion against such a powerful adversary required more than moral conviction, demanding careful planning and strategic thinking that took into account both the resources at Barrass's disposal and the broader political implications of challenging someone whose influence extended throughout the imperial hierarchy. The investigation that followed revealed the true scope of his network, while identifying potential allies whose own interests would be served by exposing the truth about his fraudulent claims to imperial authority. The moment of open defiance came not with dramatic proclamations or grand gestures, but through the simple act of refusing an order whose execution would have required participation in activities that no legitimate authority could justify. Barriss had grown increasingly reckless in his demands, perhaps believing that his supposed connection to imperial power made him immune to challenge, or perhaps driven by the psychological pressure of maintaining an elaborate deception that required ever more extreme measures to sustain. His rage at this unprecedented insubordination revealed depths of fury that seemed disproportionate to the immediate situation, suggesting that challenges to his authority touched upon fears and insecurities that went far beyond professional concerns about operational effectiveness. The mask of controlled competence that had characterized his public persona fell away to expose something more primitive and dangerous, a desperation that made him unpredictable in ways that careful planning had not anticipated. The immediate practical consequence of their rebellion was the transformation from hunters to hunted, as the vast intelligence network they had helped to build and maintain turned its resources toward their elimination. Every contact cultivated during years of successful operations became a potential threat. Every safe house established for emergency use now represented a trap that could be sprung without warning. Every piece of equipment or documentation that connected them to Imperial intelligence became evidence that could be used to track their movements across the galaxy. Pierce's military experience proved invaluable during this transition, as his understanding of Imperial tactical doctrine allowed him to predict likely approaches and prepare countermeasures that took advantage of bureaucratic rigidity and procedural limitations. His knowledge of weapons systems and communication protocols provided insights into vulnerabilities that could be exploited by those willing to abandon conventional operational security in favor of the kind of improvisation that desperate circumstances demanded. Vet's connections within the galaxy's criminal underworld opened avenues of support that remained beyond the reach of official Imperial authority, as smugglers and slicers who had spent their careers evading governmental attention possessed resources and expertise that complemented their own capabilities. Her ability to navigate the informal networks that connected beings whose survival depended upon mutual cooperation despite official hostility provided access to information and assistance that no amount of official authority could have secured. Quinn's analytical mind focused on the broader strategic implications of their situation, recognizing that simple survival would be meaningless unless they could ultimately expose the truth about Baras's deception and restore legitimate governance to the Empire. His systematic approach to intelligence gathering revealed patterns in their pursuers' behavior that suggested weaknesses that could be exploited, while his understanding of Imperial politics identified potential allies whose own interests would be served by supporting their cause. Jace's Force abilities provided early warning of immediate threats, while her moral insights helped maintain focus on their ultimate objectives, rather than allowing justified anger to drive them toward revenge that would serve no constructive purpose. Her unique perspective on the nature of truth and deception proved particularly valuable in evaluating potential allies, distinguishing between those whose support could be trusted and those whose apparent cooperation might mask hidden agendas. The hunt that followed tested every skill they had developed during years of successful operations, as their former colleagues applied techniques learned through shared training and experience to the task of tracking down those who knew their methods and capabilities intimately. The psychological warfare that accompanied more conventional pursuit included attempts to turn crew members against each other through carefully crafted disinformation and offers of immunity that were almost certainly false but difficult to evaluate under the stress of constant flight. Yet their extended pursuit also revealed flaws in Baras's network that had been concealed by years of unchallenged success, as his emphasis on personal loyalty over institutional effectiveness had created dependencies that became vulnerabilities when central authority was called into question. Agents who had followed orders without question found themselves paralyzed when conflicting information made it impossible to determine which instructions represented legitimate authority, while resources that had seemed unlimited proved finite, when their allocation required justification to skeptical superiors. The search for allies led them into contact with figures whose own experiences had given them reasons to question Baras's claims and methods, though building coalition required delicate negotiation between beings whose mutual distrust was based on years of competition and conflicting interests. Each potential ally demanded evidence that would justify the risks inherent in opposing someone of Baras's power and influence, while offering support that carried its own obligations and limitations. Servant One's role in these negotiations proved crucial, as his mysterious authority and apparent knowledge of Imperial secrets provided credibility that their own claims might have lacked. His ability to produce documentation and testimony that supported their allegations helped convince skeptical Sith Lords that the risks of inaction outweighed the dangers of challenging established authority, while his connections within the most secretive levels of Imperial governance opened channels of communication that had previously been beyond their reach. The gradual assembly of opposition forces created its own dangers, as increased activity attracted attention from those whose interests were served by maintaining the status quo, regardless of its legitimacy. The delicate balance between gathering sufficient strength to challenge Barriss effectively and avoiding premature exposure that would allow him to strike before they were ready required constant vigilance and careful coordination between allies whose natural inclinations favored decisive action over cautious preparation. The intelligence they gathered about the true scope of Barriss's deception revealed a web of corruption that extended far beyond simple impersonation of imperial authority, encompassing systematic abuse of resources, manipulation of imperial policy for personal advantage, and elimination of individuals whose only crime had been proximity to information that could expose his activities. The documentation of these abuses provided both justification for their rebellion and evidence that could be presented to imperial authorities once legitimate governance was restored. Yet perhaps most disturbing of all were the revelations about the true nature of the crisis that had enabled Barriss's rise to unchallenged power within the intelligence hierarchy. The Emperor's withdrawal from active governance had not been the temporary absence that official sources suggested, but something far more profound and potentially permanent that raised fundamental questions about the future of imperial civilization itself. The ancient Sith Lord who ruled the Empire had achieved his position through powers that transcended anything recorded in conventional historical sources. His longevity and apparent invincibility based upon techniques that extracted life force from other beings on a scale that encompassed entire worlds. His absence suggested either incapacitation or involvement in projects whose scope dwarfed even the galactic conflict between Empire and Republic, possibilities that carried implications for the future of all sentient life. Servant One's carefully worded hints about the Emperor's true nature and ultimate objectives painted a picture of ambitions that extended beyond mere political control to encompass transformation of the galaxy itself, according to visions that no mortal mind could fully comprehend. His references to ancient prophecies and cosmic cycles suggested that recent events represented merely the opening movements of conflicts that would determine the fate of countless civilizations across multiple generations. The preparation for direct confrontation with Barriss required not merely gathering sufficient military strength, but developing strategies that could counter techniques whose full scope remained unknown despite extensive intelligence gathering. His mastery of Force abilities that combined traditional Sith training with innovations developed through decades of experimentation made him an opponent whose capabilities could not be predicted through conventional analysis of his recorded activities and known associations. The crew's commitment to each other during this period of maximum danger demonstrated bonds that transcended the professional relationships that had originally brought them together. A shared hardship revealed depths of loyalty and mutual support that had been developing gradually through months of successful collaboration. Their willingness to risk everything for principles that offered no guarantee of personal benefit marked their transformation from servants of institutional authority to guardians of ideals that would guide their actions regardless of official recognition or reward. The final confrontation with Darth Barriss took place not in the shadowy corners where most of their recent activities had unfolded, but in the full glare of imperial authority within chambers where the Dark Council itself bore witness to proceedings that would determine the legitimacy of claims that had shaped policy across multiple star systems. The formal setting reflected recognition that this dispute transcended personal grievances between master and apprentice, encompassing questions about the fundamental nature of imperial governance that demanded resolution through official channels rather than private violence. Barriss entered these chambers with the bearing of someone whose confidence in his own authority had never been seriously challenged, his massive presence commanding attention through sheer physical intimidation, while his reputation for ruthless competence had earned him respect even among those who personally despised him. Yet careful observers could detect subtle signs of strain beneath his impressive facade, indications that the psychological pressure of maintaining elaborate deceptions over extended periods had begun to exact a toll that no amount of willpower could completely conceal. The evidence presented against him accumulated slowly and methodically, each piece building upon previous revelations to construct a picture of systematic fraud that became increasingly difficult to dismiss or rationalize. Documentation of communications supposedly originating from the Emperor that showed linguistic patterns inconsistent with authenticated imperial correspondence. Scheduling records that made claimed meetings logistically impossible, resource allocations that exceeded anything justified by official mission parameters or standard intelligence budgets. His initial responses demonstrated the rhetorical skills that had enabled him to convince even sophisticated observers of his legitimacy, deflecting specific accusations through appeals to institutional secrecy, while characterizing his accusers as naive idealists who failed to understand the pragmatic requirements of effective intelligence work. His arguments carried sufficient plausibility to create doubt among those predisposed to support established authority, while his references to classified information suggested that complete vindication would follow once security restrictions allowed full disclosure. Yet, as the weight of evidence continued to mount, his defensive strategy shifted from explanation to attack, focusing on the motivations and qualifications of those who dared challenge someone of his standing within the imperial hierarchy. His characterization of their rebellion as motivated by personal ambition rather than principled objection to fraud carried enough truth to create psychological pressure, as the line between legitimate concern about governmental integrity and self-serving advancement was often difficult to determine even for those directly involved. The turning point came with Servant One's testimony about the true nature of the Emperor's absence from active governance, revelations that placed Barris's claims in a context that made their fraudulent nature undeniable even to those most invested in maintaining existing power structures. The mysterious figure's apparent access to information that had been concealed from the Dark Council itself lent credibility to accusations that might otherwise have been dismissed as unsubstantiated speculation. The psychological impact of these revelations on Barris himself proved as devastating as their political implications, as the elaborate rationalization that had allowed him to maintain his self-image as a loyal servant of imperial interests collapsed under the weight of undeniable evidence. His fury at being exposed transcended professional disappointment or wounded pride, reflecting the kind of existential crisis that occurred when fundamental assumptions about identity and purpose were revealed as elaborate self-deception. The lightsaber combat that followed represented less a contest between equals than a demonstration of how philosophical corruption inevitably manifested in practical weakness, as years of justifying increasingly questionable actions had eroded the clarity of purpose that effective force use required. His technique retained the mechanical precision of extensive training, displaying the kind of textbook-perfect form that Academy instructors used as examples for aspiring students, yet lacked the unity of mind and body that characterized truly masterful application of Sith principles. His tactical choices revealed desperation rather than strategic thinking, as he abandoned the patient approach that had characterized his most successful operations in favor of increasingly reckless attacks that offered momentary advantage at the cost of long-term sustainability. The same intellectual arrogance that had enabled him to convince himself of his own indispensability now prevented him from adapting his approach when initial strategies proved ineffective against opponents who understood his methods intimately. The duel itself unfolded across multiple chambers within the Dark Council's citadel, their combat carrying them through spaces designed to showcase imperial power and authority, while testing the structural integrity of architecture that had been built to withstand siege warfare rather than internal conflict. Ancient statues of legendary Sith Lords bore witness to a contest that would determine whether their legacy would continue through legitimate succession or fraudulent appropriation of their achievements. Pierce's supporting fire provided crucial assistance during moments when Barris's superior experience and raw power threatened to overcome tactical advantages, his military training allowing him to identify opportunities for intervention that complemented rather than interfered with lightsaber techniques. His understanding of battlefield dynamics proved particularly valuable in predicting when the flow of combat would create openings that could be exploited through coordinated action rather than individual heroics. Vet's technical skills disrupted environmental systems that Barriss attempted to manipulate in his favor, her ability to slice security protocols preventing him from sealing blast doors or activating defensive measures that would have provided tactical advantages. Her knowledge of the Citadel's layout, acquired through careful observation during previous visits, allowed her to anticipate his movements and prepare countermeasures that forced him into disadvantageous positions. Quinn's strategic analysis of the battle's progression provided real-time assessment of enemy capabilities and likely future actions, his military perspective complementing force-enhanced intuition with practical understanding of how fatigue and stress affected combat effectiveness. His coordination of crew activities ensured that their collective efforts enhanced rather than hindered each other, transforming individual capabilities into group effectiveness that exceeded the sum of its parts. Jace's force abilities provided insight into Barriss's psychological state that revealed vulnerabilities hidden beneath his imposing physical presence, her unique perception allowing her to anticipate his actions based on emotional patterns rather than merely tactical considerations. Her understanding of how corruption affected force use helped predict moments when his own internal contradictions would create openings that could be exploited by those maintaining clearer focus on their ultimate objectives. The climactic moments of their confrontation revealed the true extent of Barriss's fall from the ideals that had originally motivated his rise to power, as his final desperate tactics included attempts to manipulate innocent bystanders and threaten civilian targets in ways that violated every principle of honorable combat. His willingness to embrace methods that he would once have condemned demonstrated how thoroughly his moral compass had been corrupted by years of rationalizing increasingly questionable activities. His defeat carried undertones of tragedy that transcended simple justice, representing not merely the end of one individual's corrupt career, but a cautionary demonstration of how noble intentions could be gradually perverted through compromise and self-deception. In his final moments, glimpses of the man he might have been flickered through the mask of what he had become, suggesting that his corruption had been a process rather than a single moment of moral failure. The Dark Council's response to these events reflected recognition that Barriss's fraud had threatened not merely operational effectiveness, but the fundamental legitimacy of imperial governance itself, as acceptance of his false claims would have established precedents that could be exploited by future ambitious individuals seeking to usurp authority through deception rather than earning it through demonstrated competence. Their vindication of the rebellion represented acknowledgement that institutional loyalty sometimes required opposition to those who claimed to represent institutional interests. Yet even as justice was served and legitimate authority restored, the broader implications of recent revelations continued to cast shadows over the future of imperial civilization. The Emperor's prolonged absence had created a vacuum of leadership that Barriss's fraud had only temporarily concealed, while the methods he had employed to maintain his deception suggested that others might be attempting similar appropriations of authority in different sectors of imperial governance. The recognition that they had served as instruments of justice rather than mere rebels against authority marked their transformation from servants following orders to individuals whose actions were guided by principles that transcended institutional requirements. Their success in exposing fraud and restoring legitimate governance demonstrated that even the most elaborate deceptions could be overcome through persistence, courage, and unwavering commitment to truth, regardless of personal consequences. The victory over Darth Barriss had restored legitimate authority to Imperial intelligence operations. Yet the revelations that enabled his defeat had opened questions about the nature of imperial governance that demanded answers no member of the Dark Council possessed. Servant One's cryptic references to the Emperor's true condition and ultimate objectives painted a picture of cosmic ambitions that transcended anything recorded in conventional historical archives, suggesting that recent events represented merely surface manifestations of plans whose scope encompassed the transformation of galactic civilization itself. The journey to uncover these deeper truths led them away from the political centers where normal imperial business was conducted toward locations that existed at the margins of official records, places whose very existence was known only to those initiated into mysteries that predated the current empire by millennia. The coordinates provided by Servant One guided them through hyperspace routes that avoided standard shipping lanes, following paths through regions where stellar cartography became uncertain and navigation required trust in ancient knowledge rather than modern instrumentation. Drummond Kais revealed hidden depths that had remained concealed beneath the familiar surface of imperial bureaucracy and dark council politics, its storm-racked landscape concealing structures that had been ancient when the current civilization was young. The planet's perpetual tempests served purposes beyond atmospheric drama, their electromagnetic patterns creating interference that prevented casual observation while channeling dark side energies, according to principles that combined technology with force manipulation in ways that neither tradition had achieved separately. The descent into the Emperor's hidden sanctum began in chambers that bore superficial resemblance to conventional imperial architecture, yet careful observation revealed construction techniques and material compositions that suggested origins far older than any recorded historical period. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with accumulated dark side energy, their surfaces inscribed with symbols that hurt to contemplate directly, while conveying meanings that bypassed conscious understanding to strike directly at primal fears and ambitions. Each level of their descent revealed progressively more disturbing evidence of the scope and duration of activities that had been concealed from even the Dark Council's awareness. As chambers designed for purposes that defied easy categorization stretched away into shadows that seemed to absorb light rather than merely blocking it. The air itself grew thick with malevolent presence, while temperature variations suggested heat sources whose nature became increasingly difficult to identify through conventional means. Ancient artifacts of unknown origin and purpose lined corridors that extended far beyond what the planet's surface geography should have been able to accommodate, their placement suggesting ritual significance rather than mere storage or display. Some radiated energies that made force-sensitive individuals physically uncomfortable, while others seemed to exist in a state of perpetual hunger that drew upon life force from any organic material that approached too closely. The crew's reactions to these revelations varied according to their individual backgrounds and capabilities, as the accumulated weight of dark side corruption affected each person differently depending on their natural resistance and previous exposure to such influences. Pierce's military training helped him maintain operational focus despite environmental factors that made conventional thinking increasingly difficult, while his practical worldview provided psychological anchoring that prevented complete surrender to the atmosphere of cosmic dread. Vet's natural skepticism about authority figures and institutional claims served her well in an environment where conventional reality seemed subject to revision according to incomprehensible principles, her survival instincts helping her navigate dangers that could not be quantified through normal risk assessment procedures. Her ability to maintain emotional equilibrium through humor and casual conversation proved invaluable in counteracting the psychological pressure that threatened to overwhelm anyone who contemplated their situation too seriously. Quinn's analytical mind struggled with evidence that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality itself, yet his military discipline enabled him to function effectively even when logical frameworks proved inadequate for understanding their circumstances. His systematic approach to problem-solving provided structure that helped organize responses to challenges that defied conventional tactical analysis, while his loyalty to his companions gave him reason to persevere when rational considerations might have suggested retreat. Jace's Force abilities provided insight into the true nature of their surroundings that complemented and often contradicted information available through mundane senses. Her unique perception revealing layers of meaning and intention that had been woven into the very structure of their environment over periods measured in geological rather than historical time. Her moral sensitivity helped distinguish between phenomena that merely appeared threatening and those that represented genuine existential dangers to anyone who encountered them unprepared. The final chamber of their descent opened into a space whose dimensions seemed to shift according to psychological rather than physical laws, its architecture designed to showcase power that transcended anything achievable through conventional technology or force manipulation. Here, at the heart of installations that had been consuming planetary resources for centuries, sat the figure whose influence had shaped imperial civilization according to visions that no mortal mind could fully comprehend. The Sith Emperor's physical form reflected the accumulated weight of millennia spent channeling energies that would have destroyed lesser beings within moments of exposure. His appearance combining elements of preserved humanity with alterations that suggested transformation according to principles that biology had never intended. His presence filled the chamber with authority that made resistance seem not merely futile but somehow inappropriate, as if opposition to his will represented violation of natural law rather than legitimate disagreement. His initial words carried undertones of recognition that suggested awareness of their activities extending back far beyond their recent rebellion against Barras, implying observation and evaluation that had continued throughout their entire careers without their knowledge or consent. His references to their individual capabilities and psychological profiles demonstrated understanding that could only have been acquired through sustained surveillance by sources whose existence they had never suspected. Yet, perhaps most disturbing of all was his casual dismissal of the conflicts and struggles that had defined their lives as events of trivial significance compared to projects whose scope encompassed the transformation of galactic civilization itself. The war between Empire and Republic, the political maneuvering of the Dark Council, even the recent crisis involving Barris's deception were revealed as mere background noise against achievements that would reshape the fundamental nature of existence according to visions that transcended mortal understanding. The philosophical discussion that followed challenged every assumption about the nature of good and evil, individual worth, and cosmic purpose that had guided their actions throughout their careers. His arguments possessed a terrible logical consistency that made conventional moral frameworks seem arbitrary and provincial, while his perspective on galactic history revealed patterns and purposes that cast familiar events in radically different light. His ultimate objective emerged gradually through references to ancient Sith techniques that had been thought lost, rituals that could drain life force from entire worlds to fuel transformations that would grant their practitioner powers, approaching divinity itself. The scope of his ambitions encompassed not merely political control or military conquest, but the consumption of all life in the galaxy to achieve immortality and omnipotence beyond anything recorded in either Jedi or Sith tradition. The offer he extended represented temptation on a scale that dwarfed anything they had previously encountered, as partnership in his cosmic project would grant access to power that could reshape reality according to their desires, while ensuring their survival beyond the destruction of ordinary civilization. His recognition of their exceptional capabilities suggested genuine respect for their achievements, while his willingness to share the fruits of ultimate victory implied appreciation for their potential contributions to endeavors whose success would benefit all participants. The moral test implicit in his proposition transcended questions of personal loyalty or political allegiance, striking at fundamental issues about the value of individual consciousness versus cosmic transformation, the rights of countless innocent beings versus the opportunity to participate in apotheosis itself. The choice they faced would define not merely their own destinies, but their relationship to existence itself, determining whether they would stand among the gods or be consumed along with everything else they had ever known. The crew's response to this ultimate temptation revealed depths of character that had been developing throughout their shared experiences, as bonds forged through adversity proved stronger than promises of individual advancement or even survival itself. Their commitment to protecting innocent life transcended rational calculation of odds or practical assessment of alternatives, reflecting principles that had been tested and refined through countless smaller decisions that had prepared them for this moment of ultimate choice. The rejection of ultimate power in favor of protecting innocent life marked a transformation that transcended mere moral choice, representing a fundamental redefinition of what it meant to wield strength in service of principles larger than personal ambition. The battle that followed tested every skill acquired through years of training and experience, as conventional lightsaber techniques proved inadequate against an opponent whose mastery of the Force encompassed abilities that had been developing for centuries rather than decades. The Emperor's combat style reflected his cosmic perspective on conflict, treating individual opponents as obstacles to be overcome rather than worthy adversaries deserving respect or consideration. His attacks carried the weight of accumulated dark side energy that had been building within him for millennia, each strike containing sufficient power to shatter conventional defenses, while his movements displayed the kind of effortless precision that came from absolute confidence in one's own superiority. Yet the bonds forged between crew members through shared adversity proved more resilient than any individual capability, as their coordinated response transformed the confrontation from a duel between individuals into a collaborative effort that drew strength from mutual trust and complementary abilities. Pierce's tactical expertise identified moments when supporting fire could create openings without interfering with lightsaber work, while his understanding of battlefield dynamics helped predict how the flow of combat would develop. Vet's technical skills disrupted environmental systems that the Emperor attempted to manipulate in his favor, her ability to slice ancient security protocols preventing him from accessing defensive measures that would have provided overwhelming advantages. Her knowledge of the installation's layout, acquired through careful observation during their descent, allowed her to anticipate his movements and prepare countermeasures that forced him into positions where his cosmic powers could be challenged by mortal determination. Quinn's strategic analysis provided real-time assessment of enemy capabilities while coordinating crew activities to ensure maximum effectiveness, his military training helping maintain operational focus despite the psychological pressure of confronting a being whose very presence challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality. His systematic approach to problem-solving proved particularly valuable in identifying patterns in the Emperor's behavior that suggested vulnerabilities hidden beneath his impressive display of power. Jace's Force abilities provided insight into the Emperor's true nature that revealed contradictions between his claims of cosmic wisdom and the psychological drives that actually motivated his actions. Her unique perception, allowing her to recognize that his pursuit of ultimate power was driven by fear rather than enlightenment. Her understanding of how corruption affected Force use helped anticipate moments when his own internal contradictions would create opportunities that could be exploited by those maintaining clearer focus. The turning point came not through superior strength or tactical brilliance, but through recognition that the Emperor's greatest weakness lay in his inability to understand the very bonds that gave his opponents strength to resist his overwhelming power. His cosmic perspective had isolated him from the kinds of relationships that made existence meaningful, while his pursuit of individual apotheosis had blinded him to the collaborative possibilities that could transcend any single being's capabilities. The victory they achieved was neither complete nor permanent, as the Emperor's connection to dark side energies that permeated the galaxy itself made his total destruction impossible through conventional means. Yet their success in disrupting his immediate plans and preventing the implementation of his consuming ritual bought time for the galaxy to develop defenses against threats that would inevitably return in some form, while demonstrating that even seemingly omnipotent evil could be challenged by those willing to sacrifice everything for principles larger than themselves. The aftermath of this confrontation revealed the true scope of responsibilities that came with the title of Emperor's Wrath, as the position they had earned through defiance carried obligations that extended far beyond simple military or political service. The Dark Council's recognition of their achievement reflected understanding that they had transcended normal hierarchical relationships to become something unprecedented in Imperial history, guardians whose authority derived from cosmic necessity rather than institutional appointment. The knowledge they had gained through direct confrontation with ultimate evil could never be shared with those lacking the preparation to process such revelations without psychological damage. Yet their awareness of ongoing threats required constant vigilance against signs that similar dangers might be developing elsewhere in the galaxy. Their role evolved from servants following orders to protectors whose actions were guided by principles that transcended any single government or civilization. The crew's adaptation to their transformed status involved recognition that their greatest achievements lay not in individual advancement, but in their collective ability to face impossible challenges through mutual support and shared commitment to ideals that gave meaning to their struggles. Pierce's straightforward loyalty provided emotional stability during moments when the weight of cosmic responsibility threatened to overwhelm rational decision-making, while his military perspective helped maintain connection to practical concerns that kept their mission grounded in achievable objectives. Vet's humor and emotional resilience served as antidotes to the isolation that knowledge of ultimate evil could produce. Her ability to find joy in simple pleasures providing psychological anchoring that prevented complete absorption in existential concerns. Her friendship offered reminders that existence contained beauty worth protecting regardless of cosmic threats, while her practical skills continued to prove invaluable in operations that required discretion and technical expertise. Quinn's professional competence evolved into something approaching devotion, as he recognized that his service contributed to purposes that transcended normal military objectives, his strategic planning abilities finding their fullest expression in coordinating activities that served galactic rather than merely imperial interests. His systematic approach to problem-solving provided organizational frameworks that helped manage responsibilities whose scope had expanded beyond anything contemplated by conventional command structures. Jace's unique abilities became even more crucial, as their mission evolved to encompass threats that conventional intelligence gathering could not detect. Her perception of truth and deception proving essential in evaluating potential allies and identifying hidden dangers that might represent Emperor-level corruption in different forms. Her moral guidance helped navigate ethical complexities that arose when protecting the galaxy required actions that challenged traditional concepts of justice and legitimate authority. The ship that had served as their home during years of Imperial service was transformed into something resembling a mobile monastery, its familiar spaces adapted to serve purposes that combined practical operational needs with the psychological requirements of beings whose awareness encompassed cosmic realities that ordinary minds could not process safely. Each compartment held memories of their journey from ambitious servants to cosmic guardians, while new modifications reflected their evolved understanding of their mission's scope and requirements. The operations they conducted in their new capacity required subtlety that made their previous intelligence work seem crude by comparison, as preventing future Emperor-level threats demanded intervention in situations where conventional solutions would have created more problems than they solved. Their activities focused on identifying and neutralizing conditions that could enable similar corruption to develop, while building networks of allies who could recognize and respond to dangers whose very existence had to remain hidden from public awareness. The isolation that came with bearing such terrible knowledge was mitigated by the understanding that their sacrifice served purposes larger than personal happiness or conventional success, while their shared experiences created bonds that transcended normal friendship to encompass recognition of cosmic partnership in endeavors that would continue across multiple lifetimes. Their commitment to each other provided the emotional foundation that made their broader mission psychologically sustainable, The title of Emperor's Wrath carried implications that extended beyond imperial governance to encompass responsibility for protecting the galaxy itself against threats that ordinary civilization could neither understand nor combat effectively. Their transformation from ambitious individuals seeking personal advancement to guardians whose actions served universal rather than particular interests marked completion of a journey that had begun in Korriban's ancient tombs and culminated in acceptance of burdens that would define the remainder of their existence. The transition from Emperor's Wrath, in name, to Cosmic Guardian, in practice required adjustments that went far beyond ceremonial recognition or official acknowledgement, as their new responsibilities encompassed threats that existed outside normal governmental frameworks while demanding capabilities that no conventional training could provide. The scope of their mission expanded to include not merely imperial interests, but the protection of all sentient life against dangers that most beings could never be allowed to comprehend without risking psychological damage that would make them unable to function in ordinary society. The dismantling of Darth Barrier's extensive network had revealed corruption that extended throughout multiple levels of imperial hierarchy, requiring systematic investigation to determine which individuals had been complicit in his deception and which had simply been deceived by sophisticated manipulation designed to exploit institutional loyalties. The process of separating willing collaborators from unwitting dupes demanded psychological insight that went beyond conventional interrogation techniques, while the need to maintain operational security prevented disclosure of information that might have simplified such determinations. Pierce's military experience proved invaluable during this rebuilding phase, as his understanding of command structures and operational requirements helped establish new protocols that balanced effectiveness with accountability in ways that previous systems had failed to achieve. His straightforward approach to leadership provided a model for relationships based on mutual respect rather than fear or intimidation, while his practical knowledge of logistics and personnel management ensured that idealistic principles could be implemented through workable procedures. The creation of intelligence networks loyal to galactic rather than merely imperial interests required recruitment of individuals whose motivations transcended conventional patriotism or professional advancement, seeking those whose commitment to protecting innocent life would remain steady even when official policies changed or institutional priorities shifted. The screening process involved assessments of moral character that could not be quantified through standard evaluation procedures, while training programs had to prepare operatives for threats whose very existence violated commonly accepted understanding of natural law. VET's connections within the galaxy's underworld provided access to individuals whose experiences with authority had taught them to evaluate claims based on actions rather than official pronouncements, making them potential allies whose loyalty could be earned through demonstrated competence rather than inherited through institutional position. Her ability to communicate with beings from diverse backgrounds proved essential in building coalitions that crossed traditional boundaries between species, social classes, and political affiliations. The technical challenges of monitoring galactic civilization for signs of cosmic-level threats required surveillance capabilities that combined conventional intelligence gathering with force-enhanced perception in ways that neither tradition had previously attempted. The development of new techniques for detecting dark-side corruption before it reached critical stages demanded integration of mystical insights with scientific analysis, while communication systems had to accommodate information whose content might drive unprepared individuals to madness or despair. Quinn's analytical abilities found new applications in coordinating activities whose scope spanned multiple star systems while maintaining the kind of operational security that conventional military organizations had never been required to achieve. His strategic planning encompassed scenarios that included threats to galactic civilization itself, while his tactical expertise had to account for enemies whose capabilities transcended anything recorded in standard military manuals or historical archives. The psychological burden of maintaining constant vigilance against threats that most beings would consider impossible became more manageable through recognition that their mission served purposes that gave meaning to personal sacrifices that might otherwise have seemed unbearable. The knowledge that innocent civilizations continued to exist because of their efforts provided motivation that sustained them through periods when the weight of cosmic responsibility threatened to overwhelm individual resilience. Jace's unique abilities evolved to encompass perception of corruption that operated on cosmic rather than merely individual scales, her sensitivity to truth and deception, allowing her to recognize patterns that suggested the influence of forces similar to those they had confronted in the Emperor's hidden chambers. Her moral guidance helped navigate situations where protecting the galaxy required actions that challenged conventional ethical frameworks, while her insights into human nature provided understanding of how individuals and institutions could be gradually corrupted without recognizing the process themselves. The ship that served as their mobile headquarters underwent modifications that reflected their evolved understanding of their mission's requirements, incorporating technologies that combined Imperial engineering with techniques recovered from the Emperor's installations and insights gained through Force-enhanced perception. Living spaces were adapted to serve purposes that combined practical operational needs with psychological requirements of beings whose awareness encompassed realities that ordinary minds could not process safely. Their activities during this period focused on preventing conditions that might enable future cosmic-level threats to develop, requiring intervention in situations where conventional solutions would have created more problems than they solved. The subtle nature of their work demanded patience measured in years rather than months, while success often took forms that provided no public recognition or official acknowledgement of their contributions to galactic security. The training of successors became a priority that required careful selection of individuals whose psychological resilience and moral character could withstand exposure to knowledge that had driven others to madness or despair, while instruction programs had to prepare them for responsibilities that no previous generation had been required to assume. The challenge lay in conveying essential information without overwhelming students with implications that required gradual preparation to process safely. The crew's relationships with each other deepened through shared understanding of purposes that transcended individual survival or advancement, their bonds forged through experiences that few others could comprehend, creating intimacy that went beyond normal friendship to encompass recognition of cosmic partnership in endeavors that would continue across multiple lifetimes. Their commitment to protecting each other provided emotional foundation that made their broader mission psychologically sustainable. Pierce's evolution from military professional to cosmic guardian reflected recognition that true strength lay not in following orders, but in serving principles that gave meaning to existence itself. His loyalty expanding from imperial service to universal protection, while maintaining the practical competence that made him valuable regardless of the scope of challenges they faced. His straightforward approach to problem-solving provided stability during periods when the complexity of their mission threatened to overwhelm rational planning. Vet's journey from enslaved treasure hunter to guardian of galactic civilization demonstrated possibilities for transformation that transcended background or social position, her natural resilience and humor serving as antidotes to the isolation that cosmic responsibility could produce. Her friendship offered reminders that existence contained beauty worth protecting regardless of ultimate threats, while her skills continued proving essential in operations requiring discretion and technical expertise. Quinn's development from disgraced officer to strategic coordinator of cosmic protection reflected the kind of redemption that came through service to purposes larger than personal advancement, his analytical abilities finding fullest expression in planning activities that served galactic rather than merely imperial interests. His systematic approach provided organizational frameworks that helped manage responsibilities whose scope had expanded beyond anything contemplated by conventional command structures. The recognition that their mission would continue indefinitely, spanning generations and possibly centuries, required acceptance of burdens that would define not merely their own destinies, but their relationship to civilization itself. Their transformation from individuals seeking power to guardians protecting life represented completion of spiritual journeys that had begun with very different objectives, while their commitment to each other provided the emotional foundation that made such sacrifice meaningful rather than merely dutiful. The galaxy turns in its ancient rhythm, star systems wheeling through space in patterns that have remained unchanged since before organic life first stirred in primordial oceans. Yet now those familiar constellations shine upon worlds that exist in safety, earned through sacrifices that their inhabitants will never know were made on their behalf. Children play in streets that might have been consumed by cosmic hunger, while scholars debate philosophical questions in libraries that contain knowledge preserved through vigilance maintained across the void between distant suns. The ship that carries the Emperor's wrath and their companions through hyperspace has become more than mere transportation, evolving into a sanctuary where those who bear impossible knowledge can find peace among others who understand the weight of cosmic responsibility without requiring explanation or justification. The familiar hum of engines provides a soothing backdrop to conversations that range from practical operational concerns to philosophical reflections on the nature of existence itself, while viewport windows offer glimpses of nebulae whose beauty remains unmarred by the darkness that once threatened to devour them. Pierce has found contentment in service that transcends military hierarchy to encompass protection of life itself, his straightforward loyalty discovering its fullest expression in missions that serve universal rather than merely imperial interests. The scars he bears tell stories of battles fought in places that appear on no official records, while his quiet satisfaction reflects recognition that his strength has been dedicated to purposes that give meaning to every moment of pain endured and every risk accepted without hesitation or complaint. His evening routines aboard ship involve maintenance tasks that keep their mobile sanctuary functioning at peak efficiency, though these practical activities provide meditation as much as mechanical necessity. The rhythm of checking systems and calibrating instruments offers psychological grounding that helps process experiences that challenge conventional understanding of reality, while his presence provides emotional stability for companions whose responsibilities require them to contemplate cosmic implications that could overwhelm individual resilience. Vet's transformation from enslaved treasure hunter to guardian of galactic civilization represents possibilities for growth that transcend background or social position, her natural resilience and humor serving as constant reminders that existence contains joys worth protecting regardless of ultimate threats that lurk in the darkness between stars. Her laughter echoes through corridors that have witnessed discussions of cosmic evil, while her friendship offers anchor points of ordinary humanity amid responsibilities that could otherwise lead to isolation from the very life they strive to protect. Her technical skills continue evolving to meet challenges that combine conventional slicing with force-enhanced perception, developing capabilities that allow her to interface with systems whose design principles incorporate mystical as well as technological elements. Yet her greatest contribution remains the emotional warmth that transforms their ship from operational base into genuine home, creating spaces where even cosmic guardians can experience the simple pleasures that make existence meaningful beyond duty or obligation. Quinn's journey from disgraced officer to strategic coordinator of galactic protection reflects redemption achieved through service to principles that transcend personal advancement or institutional loyalty. His analytical mind has adapted to encompass planning scenarios that include threats to civilization itself, while his military precision provides organizational frameworks that help manage responsibilities whose scope extends across multiple star systems and generations of potential successors. His private moments involve studying reports that chronicle the subtle signs of corruption or cosmic influence that might herald the return of threats they have faced before. His systematic approach to intelligence analysis serving as early warning system that could provide crucial preparation, time when danger inevitably emerges from whatever hidden corners it currently inhabits. Yet, despite the grim nature of his vigilance, he finds satisfaction in knowing that his competence serves purposes that give meaning to every hour of careful observation and methodical planning. Jace's unique abilities have evolved to encompass perception of truth that operates on scales encompassing entire civilizations, her sensitivity to deception allowing recognition of patterns that suggest influence from forces similar to those they confronted in the Emperor's hidden chambers. Her moral guidance helps navigate ethical complexities that arise when protecting the galaxy, requires actions that challenge conventional frameworks of justice and legitimate authority, while her insights into human nature provide understanding of how corruption can develop gradually without being recognized by those experiencing it. Her meditation practices involve communion with force energies that span the galaxy itself, monitoring the subtle flows of light and darkness that indicate the overall health of civilizations scattered across countless worlds. These sessions require psychological preparation that few beings could sustain, yet they provide information essential for detecting threats before they reach critical stages, while her connection to cosmic forces offers reassurance that their mission serves purposes that transcend individual understanding or mortal lifespans. The Emperor's wrath themselves has discovered peace that comes not from the absence of conflict, but from the recognition that their strength serves purposes larger than personal ambition or conventional success. The title they bear carries obligations that will continue as long as sentient life exists in the galaxy, yet the burden feels lighter when shared among companions whose loyalty has been tested through trials that forged bonds stronger than blood relationships or institutional hierarchies. Their daily routines combine practical operational requirements with philosophical reflection on the nature of power and its proper use, finding meaning in the paradox that true strength manifests through protection rather than domination. The lightsaber that once symbolized personal advancement now represents commitment to defending those who cannot protect themselves, while combat skills developed for conquest have been transformed into tools for preserving the innocent. The endless cycle of hyperspace travel provides opportunities for contemplation that ground cosmic responsibilities in human-scale understanding, as conversations with companions offer perspectives that prevent isolation within the vast scope of their mission. Stars that stream past viewport windows represent civilizations that continue existing because choices were made that prioritized universal welfare over individual benefit, while the gentle rhythm of ship systems creates a meditative environment that soothes minds that have contemplated realities too terrible for ordinary consciousness to process safely. Future generations will inherit a galaxy protected by vigilance they will never know was maintained on their behalf, while institutions established through current efforts will continue monitoring for signs of cosmic threats that could emerge from sources not yet imagined. The knowledge preserved through their mission will guide successors whose own sacrifices will ensure that the light of civilization continues burning regardless of what darkness may arise to challenge it. The ship continues its journey through space that holds no more terrors for those who have faced ultimate evil and chosen to defend rather than join it, carrying passengers whose rest has been earned through trials that tested every aspect of character and commitment. The soft hum of engines provides a lullaby that speaks of safety purchased through vigilance, while the infinite vista of stars visible through transperistal windows offers promise that existence contains beauty worth any sacrifice required to preserve it. Their legacy lies not in monuments or official recognition, but in the continued existence of countless beings who will never know how close they came to cosmic annihilation. Children who will grow to maturity in a galaxy where their greatest concerns involve ordinary challenges rather than existential threats to all life. This knowledge provides satisfaction that transcends any reward that public acclaim could offer, while the bonds forged through shared sacrifice create meaning that makes their eternal vigil feel like privilege rather than burden. The Emperor's wrath and their companions sleep peacefully aboard their ship as it drifts through hyperspace toward unknown destinations, their rest protected by the understanding that their mission serves purposes that will endure long after individual lives have ended, while their friendship provides emotional foundation that makes cosmic responsibility bearable rather than overwhelming. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and continued vigilance, yet tonight offers rest earned through dedication to ideals that give meaning to existence itself.